Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to look at how to add music and sound effects to the simple tank game tutorial that I showed you a few days ago. Now, just so you know, in the case of this project, there's really no difference between music and sound effects. They're both audio files, they're both audio clips, and they are played using an audio source component. So there really isn't any difference between them. In some games there may be, but in this one there's not. So there are two basic ways in this game that you're going to have an audio source play. You can have an audio source play as soon as an object is instantiated. So the way you do that is you have an object, say an explosion, and you have an audio boom that you want to play. You attach the boom audio source directly to the explosion object and you have it set to play and awake. That way, as soon as the object is instantiated, the sound plays. So really no coding involved, automatic synchronization. The second way that you can have a sound play is when it's based on a certain condition. Maybe an object wasn't actually instantiated, but maybe there was some kind of event, and so you would have a line of code where you refer to that audio source, and we'll show you to do that, and then you would just say play the audio source. Okay, so those are the two ways that you can do it. Have it automatically play when something is instantiated, or actually call it through C# code. So let's quickly run this, and then I'll show you how I did each part. Most of this is done via the first type, the former type, where it simply plays when object instantiates. So you should hear music playing, and when I shoot, there's a sound when they shoot, there's a sound when they explode, there's a boom. And by the way, the actual audio files that I'm playing are irrelevant, so even if you don't like the audio source, it doesn't matter, the coding and the approach still works. So when the crate drops, there's a sound effect. When it crashes, there's a sound effect. And I was talking, but when you pick it up, there's also a sound effect. So I think that's all the sound effects involved in this game. If you crash, there's also an explosion, but that uses really the same approach. Okay, so the overwhelming majority of these effects are, as I said, used by having an object play on awake. So let's look at how that looks. So if we click on the GM object, the GM object is essentially an empty object, doesn't have any visual appearance to it. Where it's located really doesn't matter for the most part. It's simply holding code, it's holding a script, and that script manages a lot of what's going on in the scene. So for that for that object, you can see there's an audio source here. And by the way, to add an audio source, you just grab an audio file, drag and drop it, and it creates an audio source. Okay. So this audio source is the background music. And then it's just a matter of having play on awake checked, which it is by default. And since it's music, you're probably going to want it to loop. And then you're going to want to adjust the volume. For some reason, this one was really loud, so I had to turn the volume way down. So that's how you make the music play, and this approach is really how most of the sound effects appear, most of the sound effects play. So the GM object is instantiated when the scene is instantiated, is run, and then that means the music plays automatically because it's attached to that, play on awake. So like for instance, when you shoot the cannonball, okay, and when they shoot the cannonball, the sound, the audio source, the sound effect is attached directly to that object. So it takes a similar approach. So here's your shot. Audio source, playing awake. Now this one we don't want to loop. So maybe if you had like a missile that had like a thruster sound to it, you may want that to loop. Or if it's like a fireball, you may want the fireball to keep looping. But this is more kind of an explosive sound, so you want it to play and awake but not loop. So again, it's exactly the same approach as the background music, that when the object's instantiated, this plays on awake. Same thing for the enemy shot. And again, like I said, if you don't like the sound effect, it doesn't matter. You can use whatever audio clip you want. That this is about the coding and the approach, not the actual sound file. I just couldn't be bothered to find another shot sound. So same thing, you have an audio source, it's set to play and awake, so when the shot is instantiated, it automatically plays. You have automatic synchronization. So are there times that I did not do this? Yes. So when the tank picks up the crate, okay? So if you're looking at the tank object, here's the audio source. And as you can see, well, actually you wouldn't know by the name, but the audio source is there. But see how it says play and awake is not checked? this will not play when the tank is instantiated, because when the tank is instantiated, that's the beginning of scene. You don't want the sound effect to play. You want to wait until a certain event happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our script. And the script attached to this is called Hero. And by the way, it's right here, Power Pickup. So if we go to that, so here's Hero. Ignore all the other coding. Like I said, I covered that in another tutorial, but it's irrelevant to this except for the small part I'm going to show you. So public audio source power pickup. So this is going to allow us to associate the audio source with this variable. So what you do is you put that into the code, and again, public allows this to be accessible in the editor. And then what you do is that we'll put it right here, and then you literally just grab the audio source itself and drag and drop it onto the power pickup. So that might seem counterintuitive, but that's how certain variables work, is that you can actually drag and drop a component to it. So not all drag and drops are necessarily an asset or a game object. It might actually be a component that leaks out to an asset or a game object. So yes, you create the variable and then you drag and drop the audio source component to that. All right, so that lets us be able to directly address that audio source. And the only thing that we want to do is we want it to play. So when we want it to play, we're going to play when it has an impact. So on, trigger, enter, but only certain things. We don't want this to play when it hits another tank. We want it to play when it hits the power-up. So in the on, trigger, enter collider, if the other object, if it has the tag of power-up, I've covered tags before. So if the other object has the power-up tag, then here we go. Pow pickup dot play. So if you recall, that's this, pow pickup. So it's just pow pickup dot play. So when you collide with the power up, play that sound. Again, it's not set to loop, so it'll play it just once. Now we're going to look at another example of that, and that is, so for the, I don't think I covered the explosion yet. That's the same principle as the background music though. And this is the example I gave at the very beginning of this video. And that is, this particle system is the explosion effect. And so you have the audio source attached to it and it's set to play as a wake. So when the explosion instantiates, the sound effect plays. Again, rinse and repeat. It's the same concept, whether it's background music or it's an explosion. It is using that same principle of playing when the object awakens. Now let's look at the crate. So here's the crate object. And as you can see, it has an audio source and it's playing awake. And again, this is the sound of it dropping. It's kind of like a whistling sound. So that's pretty straightforward. However, what happens is when it instantiates, so let's go to our crate script. So we have a variable for boards and we have a variable for power up because two things get instantiated. Since the crate itself is not destructible, we simply replace the crate with a particle system and we replace it with the power up object. So again, we're looking for a collision. If the other object is ground, then instantiate the boards and instantiate the power up. Now the boards takes that same principle of playing on a wake. So it looks like it's different, but it's actually very similar. So one object has a sound effect attached to it. It instantiates another object which has a sound effect attached to it. So really, I think the only one that took the approach of not using play on a wake is the picking up of the power up. Picking up of that is when a audio source is played via C# script. So everything else is pretty much coordinated or synchronized with it being instantiated. And again, simple game, so it's easy to do that. There are games where you might have multiple sound effects, and so it would depend on what one that you want to play. So for instance, right now there's only one power-up. Say there are 5 different power-ups and I wanted to have a different sound for each power-up, then it would be rinse and repeat of what we did with the tank. And that the tank would actually have multiple audio sources, would have multiple variables for those audio sources, and then when we check to see, we wouldn't just say, if we collide with the power up, we'd have a different tag for each power up, and based on that power up, so you'd have one. So rather than saying power up, it would say health up. Play the health sound. Another one that says armor up, and then you play the armor sound. And again, each one of those would have their own variables. So I think that's about it. I certainly don't want to take up any more of your time because, again, I've covered this topic before, but since I did a tutorial on this and I'm thinking about making this a fully available game on itch.io, we'll see. I have a little bit more, a few more tweaks that I think I really need to do before I believe it should be put up there. But yes, I wanted to show you how that was done, and so hopefully this was helpful. If there's anything else you would like to see, please let me know. So leave a like, leave a comment, and please enjoy the rest of your day.